Hi, this is the Magnificent Midlife podcast, and I'm Rachel Lancaster. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started, and the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now is our time. My guest today is Alice Morrison, and she's an adventurer. She's the Indiana Jones for girls. She's done so many things that would test anyone's endurance. The Marathon des Sables, the Tour d'Afrique. She was the first woman to walk the full length of the Draa River in Morocco, where she lives. She's trekked through the Sahara and completed the Everest Trail Race. She's written several books, and the most recent is Walking With Nomads. Just incredible, really. I'm a bit in awe. Welcome, Alice.
Well, after all our problems trying to get ourselves linked up with sound, I doubt you're actually in awe, in fairness, Rachel.
Oh, I am. Because you're doing all of these amazing things that I would like to do. I've done a teeny weeny little bit of them.
Oh, yeah, tell me more.
I've been to Jordan. But that's it. No, we're going to talk about you first. And I have trekked through Wadi Rum in Jordan. So
very good.
That is the one bit I have done. But anyway, I'm so excited that you're here. And it's hard really to know where to begin. There is so much that I want to ask you. But where did your love of Africa and the Middle East come from?
It's been a lifelong passion. When I was 6 weeks old, my parents bundled me up, and my mum, never having left Scotland before, got on a boat with my dad and sailed to Kenya and then took a train across country to Uganda. And I was brought up in the foothills of the Mountains of the Moon. So from my very earliest memories are all of Africa. And we stayed in Africa with just about 1 year's break, but the rest of the time until I was 11, or 12. So really, I think those earliest memories are indelible. And I find in my midlife, I'm 59 now, I was 59 on the 25th of May. I find that I circle back to my childhood, and it's been a long love affair, and I'm back in Africa now, and that's how I like it.
Happy birthday, belated happy birthday.
Thank you.
You're a Gemini like my mum then.
Yes. Two faces. Not two-faced. Two faces. There's a difference.
Well, I know that you had a very free childhood, didn't you? Up till 11 anyway. But then you ended up in boarding school in Edinburgh, which was completely the opposite, wasn't it? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was thinking about this in the car, actually. I went for a swim this morning. So I had a very, very free childhood. I wasn't sent to school, I think, till I was about 7. My mum taught me to read when I was 3, and I was just roaming around the hills, doing whatever I wanted. It was the days when parents really let their kids out and about. So I just walked around the African bush, and of course, no harm came to me. I didn't wear any shoes. And then suddenly I went to boarding school in Edinburgh, and I'd had kind of foretastes because we spent a bit of time in Britain for about a year while my dad got an MA, and I'd been to school in Britain. It was terrifying to me. And then I went to boarding school, and I think my first really clear memory is walking into the dormitory where I was going to be staying at the age of 11 and having this absolute moment of clarity, which was, Alice, you're on your own, sink or swim. No one is going to help you or save you. And I think that was my first understanding. And actually, I think it's given me the independence and the kind of that a little bit of courage that I've needed to overcome, not to overcome, but to enter, I think, some of the adventures I've done. So that was the beginning. But boarding school, it's a mixed bag. Wonderful people. I had a wonderful English teacher who inspired me and who I still think about when I'm writing. My home city of Edinburgh, where I was born, and stayed briefly. And there was midnight feasts and all sorts of being together with a big gang of girls. But I mean, for me, there was a definite, when I look back on it, and this is actually in retrospect, it wasn't at the time, I just feel it was an opportunity wasted. We were very much kept in the boarding school, minimal exeats and no extracurricular activities. There was literally nothing to do. after you finished school, except for do your homework or do your piano lessons. That was it. You were allowed a radio. We were allowed to watch TV twice a week. And in a way, actually, I don't think that's good. I think I missed out, but I didn't miss out because it also taught me to just make the absolute best of your companions, who you're with. Talk about whatever, talk rubbish and enjoy the things that you have. And I think that has really stayed with me. So I was considering that, as I say, just this morning, thinking, stop whinging about your lack of freedom between the ages of 11 and 17 and start appreciating the fact that it taught you all these things.
And that ability to make the best of who you're with really comes out in your book. Certainly the most recent one, Walking with Nomads. I mean, I just love it. And the relationships that you have with your guides and how that grows and how you delight in being with them, which I think is just wonderful. And I was going to ask, do you ever feel lonely doing these grand expeditions because you are often the only woman, and yet you have this bond with the men, which is also, it must be really unusual for them to have this close connection to a woman who's not their wife or even, their mother or their close family member.
Honestly, Rachel, first of all, thank you for that enormous compliment, because if there's one thing I want for people who read my book, it is to enjoy the journey and enjoy that relationship with the boys, the camels, and learn about Morocco from inside Morocco, from those conversations and from what I'm seeing and hearing and having fun with. They teased me relentlessly. But yes, I think before I went on this journey, which was to walk the whole length of Morocco, which eventually took 7.5 months, with 3 Amazigh Muslim guides. Amazigh is the correct term for Berber, and 6 camels, my favorite being Hamish. The only thing that really, really worried me, actually, was that I would be lonely, exactly as you said. And the reason I thought I would be lonely is not having met the men or the camels before I started. I knew they were very religious Muslim men, and they spoke Arabic and Tashlahit, and I speak Arabic, and I'm learning Tashlahit better now, but, it was pretty minimal. And they were men from a completely different culture, and I know that in this culture, none of their wives, sisters, mothers would ever do what I'm doing. You would never imagine going alone with men into the desert and sleeping in the same without your husband or your father or your brother being there. It's completely impossible. So I worried they'd kind of disapprove of me, or that they'd keep me at arm's length, and I would be the client and they would be the guides. But that didn't happen. And just one of the stories in the book, but it's very seminal for me. It's a moment I'll remember. The kind of 3rd day of the trek, and everyone had left, the cameras had left, everyone had left. And it's just me and the men. And I was walking behind the camel train, feeling a little bit sorry for myself, thinking, oh my God, I'm all on my own. It's so hard. And Brahima Halfi, who was the expedition leader, and who was the person who I became closest to, who is a Hafid al-Quran. He's actually an imam. He's extremely religious and insanely tolerant, which is perhaps surprising. He yelled back at me, Zahra. He'd given me the name Zahra, which means flower and luck. And he said, Zahra, get up here. One hand can't clap.
Oh.
And that was it. That was it. I was in the team. And from then on, I was just part of them. And, I worked at it and they worked at it. And it's just been one of the most beautiful relationships of my life. And I'm still in touch with Brahim and Adzi, who are with me for the whole 7.5 months, and the other 3 guides, Ali, Lehu, and Bibi, who came in and came out. So I'm still in touch with all of them. And it is a very special relationship. And yes, incredibly unusual there is every reason for me not to be friends with Brahim and Adzi, but we are very close friends, and I treasure them and they treasure me.
It's very interesting to me because you have created such a vibrant picture of the desert, of the journey, but also of the people, that I was desperate to know what these people looked like. So yesterday, in preparation for our podcast recording, I was there on YouTube looking at the videos that you had made of each of your companions. And I was so pleased to be able to see them. And I saw you climbing up to see the dinosaur footprints. And it was beautiful. It was so beautiful. And it was so lovely to see all the smiles, the huge, great big smiles on these men's faces, and the way you captured these moments with them. So yeah, congratulations. It's beautiful. And
Thank you.
that strength of relationship really comes across in the book. It's beautiful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So what is it like, apart from having to build this relationship with these particular men, what is it like traveling as a woman in the places that you go to?
Well, in my daily life, obviously I'm traveling through kind of, normal Morocco, urban Morocco and so on. But for Walking with Nomads, I was very much in the wilderness for most of the time. But there are lots of people, well, lots, I use the term lots very loosely. There are people in the wilderness. And the way society works there is, well, actually, quite often generically, is that the men are outside doing things. Some of the women herd cattle and goats as well, camels. But the women are at home in the tent or in the home, looking after the children, doing the cooking. It's very traditional male-female roles. And so we when we'd meet someone, we'd often meet, at first we'd meet a man. And the thing for me is I have the magic key. I have Arabic and I have Tashlahit. And the minute I open my mouth and speak, and people can see that I can actually, speak, they're like, oh, and delighted. And it's like, it's the most life-affirming thing I've ever done, learn Arabic, because literally 99.9% of the time I've been met with genuine pleasure and happiness that I've taken the time to learn Arabic, and that I do, and that I can communicate, and that I understand, and that, if somebody quotes the Quran, I kind of know what they're saying. So that has been a huge key for me. So I'll meet the men first, and then, be taken to the women, and then we're segregated. Oh, not always, but often we'd be segregated, and the men, Brahim, Addi, and Lahu would go to the men, and I would go to the women. And that's something I think that I can bring. I think it's my USP. I can bring this to the table, is that traditionally adventurers and explorers are very often men. And of course, they've got no access to the women. And I have all the access to the women and the children. And I get to see them and talk to them and be with them. And I also get treated as an honorary man, so I have all the access to the men. So I do think that, I hope that that's something I can reflect, and I really genuinely try to when I come back, because it's unique. You don't often get an insight into how the women cook in a tent, or, what are they worried about during Corona? And the answer is their daughter's education, actually, is the answer to that question. But all these things that I was able to explore. And also, you can imagine, all my 6 camels were male. My 3 guides are male. Every time I met a woman, I was like, oh, thank God, girl time. And I'd be like cuddling them and kissing them. And they'd give me clothes, partly because I stank like a horse, or like a camel, in fact. And it was just lovely to have some female energy around, because most of the time, which I also like, I was surrounded by male energy. So it was a real kind of, it was a bonus. Being a girl is a bonus.
Yeah. Being a girl who speaks the lingo. I speak Chinese, so I experience the same thing whenever I go to China. If you make the effort and you open your mouth and you speak the language, doors open, don't they? And people are just so different, because here's somebody who doesn't look like me, doesn't have my experience at all, but can communicate with me. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. Yes. Well, you know exactly what I mean. And honestly, that is my one top tip for any travelers. Every country you go to, learn at least 10 words of the language, because, even when I go to Germany, I'm using my school German. I don't care that everyone speaks fluent English. I'm like, Guten Tag, danke. And people like it. I mean,
it makes such a difference. And we Brits, we're not good at doing it, are we? We're really not. We assume that everybody's going to speak English. And well, they might, but it doesn't make any friends necessarily.
Yeah, it's not about that. And I think Rachel, you and I, we need to start a campaign to learn 10 words. You need to know hello, goodbye, thank you, delicious and beautiful.
Please. Oh,
and views.
beautiful as well.
Yes.
Oh, I would add beer to that, but perhaps not where you're traveling. So I would like to ask, so I know that you practice Ramadan, even though you're not Muslim. So I'd love to know about that and why you've chosen to do that. And I know most recently you've been doing it, haven't you? And so tell us about that.
Okay, so Ramadan. So where I live in the Atlas Mountains of Morocco, in a very small village, and I live in a family compound. So there are 4 families, and in 4 houses built into the side of the mountain, and then my little tiny house above the cow, looking out over to the mountains beyond. And we have there's a big yard where all the kids play, and then there's a gated door. Chickens are outside the sitting room window, cows outside the bedroom window. So it's very much a family place, and the 4 families are all related, and then there's me. So obviously it's a close-knit community. And when I first moved here, I was the women, really not all of them speak Arabic because they didn't go to school, and the language here is Tashlahit. So I've been making an effort to learn that, and I've made an effort to be communicative. And of course, these are the loveliest, most welcoming, most wonderful people in the universe. So, any effort you make is reciprocated 100-fold. I mean, I'm always getting a knock at the door and someone will hand in a stuffed, like a stuffed flaky pancake with meat and onions, saying, "Oh, we thought you might be hungry." So it's lovely. But I think one of the ways to integrate is you have to approach the culture. And it's very much like, what clothes should you wear in Morocco? Now, you can come to Morocco and you can wear booty shorts and a halter neck top. Show off your boobs, show off your legs. If you're beautiful and look great, or even if you're not, but you feel good, you can do that. No one is going to say anything to you. But what you will do immediately is put up a massive barrier between you and the people, especially the women, because that's not their culture. So I think if you want to approach a culture, you have to approach. It's not about being myself in this country. It's about, what can I do to integrate into this community that I do want to be part of, and I do believe I am becoming part of. So obviously Ramadan comes along, and I know most people know about Ramadan, but you basically fast, which means you don't drink, and you don't eat, and you don't smoke, and you don't have sex. It's kind of nil by mouth or any other orifice between sunrise and sunset, which this year was roughly 4 a.m. to 7:20 to 8, going on to 8, because it changes every day slightly. So it's a long time, and not drinking is extremely difficult, and it's a month. It's not a couple of days. However, I made a decision earlier on. How could I sit in my little house? I'm out with my neighbours all the time. The window behind me looks onto Fatima's house. The doors are always open. The kids are always in and out. How could I sit here and drink a coffee and let that smell waft into the compound? Or, how can I sit and have a nice glass of cool water when I'm dying of thirst at 2:00 in the afternoon? And my neighbours aren't. So I decided to do Ramadan. And at first, to be honest, I mean, it is a month where my activity suffers. I don't do hardly any exercise. I don't work very hard. I'm lucky in that I've got that option. If you're working in the fields, you're still going to have to work in the fields. I'm very privileged. So in a way, it's a wasted month, if you like to think of it like that, in our kind of Western way we think about achievement, and I must have this, and I've got my to-do list, which, by the way, I very much do have a to-do list.
So what is it like day to day when you're practicing Ramadan?
It's very difficult. Your energy levels completely decrease. You feel, because you're not drinking, by about 2:00, I had a terrible headache every single day for the first 2.5 weeks, which lasted until I took my first drink at 7:30. Your mouth your breath stinks, absolutely stinks, because you can brush your teeth, but you're not allowed to swallow anything, and it's very hard because your body wants to get the water, but you're desperately trying not to swallow your tooth water. Your energy levels are 0, and I didn't find that change. It was easier. This is my 3rd year. It was certainly easier this year than the first year, just psychologically. You tend to sleep a lot, try and sleep late, and also have a nap in the afternoon if you can. physically, I feel unwell. I guess you feel like you're in the first stages of flu most of the time. It got easier. The first week is hard, and then it does get easier. And then by the end, you're just desperate for it to be over. But, every night I break the fast with my neighbours downstairs or across the road, and you're in that family setting. And what happens is you all sit down together at the table. Well, actually, I say all. The women and the men are segregated. The men eat separately so even within the family, the men eat separately from their wives. So the men will go up to their room, the women will serve them, and then you're all waiting. You're all sitting at the table like this, waiting for the call to prayer, because when the first Allahu Akbar sounds, then you can start. So when you hear Allahu Akbar, what you do is you have 1, 3, or 5 dates. Has to be an odd number, and you either drink water if you want to, or usually you start with a soup called harira, which is a beautiful tomato chickpea soup, and you eat it with dates and also with the sweet pastry called shabakia, which is basically dough deep fried and then rolled in honey or syrup. Fantastic. It's about 3 million calories per quarter of an inch. So you drink the soup, and I'll always drink 2 bowls, eat the shabakia and the dates, and you're all together. And the thing is, that first dates are a superfood. Within 5 minutes, you feel good. You feel great. And then everyone's relaxed. Everyone's happy. You've done it. You've done another day. And, in the culture, it's like, thank you, God, because you gave me enough strength to fast again today. And it's that feeling of gratitude. You're on family. I'm not with my own family, but I'm with my kind of all my secondary family. And it's worth it. The feeling of community and the enjoyment of your food and your gratitude for that food is immense. So, deprivation is the key to happiness, really, although I'm not very good at depriving myself, so I have to be forced.
But it's a super difficult thing to do. I mean, so I have a Muslim friend, a neighbor, in fact, who always brings me food at the end of Ramadan, which is always a very lovely thing. And so I'm very aware of when it's happening. But I remember thinking it must be so difficult for Muslims in Scandinavia, because the daylight hours, they just last forever in the summer, don't they? I just don't know how they do it.
Yeah, I mean, there is a dispensation that if you're somewhere like, where it's basically light all the time, you can follow Mecca. So you can follow, or choose another Arab country. And actually I do that because I'm doing Ramadan. If I go back to the UK for a couple of days, I'm not going to break Ramadan because it's so hard. I would hate to waste like 4.5 weeks of effort, or 3.5 weeks of effort, or 2 days. So I always just keep to the Moroccan timings when I'm in Scotland, if I'm in Scotland or London or whatever.
Interesting. Wow, that's very good. I like that. So I know that you were talking about dates, the importance of dates, and they were very important on your trek, on the Draa River trek, weren't they? You always had dates, and then you found a date tree, and everybody was competing to get all the dates off the tree, weren't they?
Honestly, I tell you, sorry, I hate to be gender specific, but boys will be boys. Any chance to compete against each other, they were at it. We got to this the food, especially when it's simple, proper food, like not imported, not flown in, not different countries' cuisine, but food in the country, of the country, is always like it is for a reason, and dates are like they are for a reason, in that everyone in Morocco eats dates. They're so good for you. They're so easy to transport. They don't go off, etc. And they give you massive energy. So at night, we'd always, actually during the trek, we'd always have soup, because you need water and salt to revive yourself after walking, and dates. And we'd come to this tiny oasis. It was only about 6 little trees, which had obviously, I think, been a result of camels or goats passing that way and pooing out date stones, and they'd grown from that, because we weren't, that's the only way they could grow. There was no humans there. So we passed through this tiny oasis, and the boys we're looking on the ground, and there's all these dried dates on the ground. The boys are like, what? So Adi, who is a nomad himself, the nomads they don't have anything, so they value everything, and they use everything. He's like, getting those dates. So they start throwing snow. He tries to climb the tree first, not happening. So then he gets these big rocks and he starts throwing them up at the dates. We've all stopped to watch, and I'm like, I tried, I can't get anywhere close, so I give up and just do videos, which is my job. And then Brahim's like looking on a bit snottily, like, oh, boys, honestly, because Addy's much younger. And then, of course, the minute Addy starts getting dates down, Brahim joins in. And the pair of them, they've got the jalabas hiked up. They've got these great big rocks, which they're flinging into the air with absolute kind of no thought of perhaps safety in the fact that rocks that come up, go down. And then they're going, Zahra, go collect the dates that we've got for you. And I'm thinking, if I go onto that date tree, I'm going to get clogged on the head by a rock. But we collected a whole load and we ate them over the next few days. And it was just, one of those silly kind of expedition moments that we enjoyed. And then they're going, Addy's going, Zahra, look at me. I've got more than Brahim. I can throw higher than he can. I'm better than he is. And Brahim's going, I don't think so. Look at this one. Wait. Look at this one. Look at this one. These are grown men. So it just cracked me up at the time.
I'm going to switch gears a little bit now because there was something very awful that happened just before you started that trek. And I wondered if you could just talk about that and how you managed to still find the courage, really, to keep going and to actually do it. And it added to all the complications of getting approvals and everything else, didn't it?
Yes, what happened was in the village I live in, actually, and on one of the routes that I regularly walk by myself, two young Scandinavian women camped overnight, and they were murdered, beheaded and videoed and died by Islamic extremists who were not from the region, who came in from the region and who were here waiting. They planned a terrorist attack. It was a terrorist attack. These two women, they were just so unlucky it was them. And that happened just before I left, about two weeks before I left. So the first thing that happened was our whole village, this whole area went into shock and people were absolutely distraught. And they, my landlord, who's kind of 58-year-old man, was sitting on my sofa crying, saying, these people sent us their daughters. We haven't kept them safe. How could this happen here? Who has done this? This is not Islam. This has nothing to do with Islam. This is evil. This is the devil. So the whole country was distraught. It was a crime that really touched people's hearts, and because it was horrific. These two beautiful young women coming to enjoy nature, the beautiful Atlas Mountains. They had done absolutely nothing to warrant this. Not that anyone warrants it at all, but they were totally innocent, Baria. And they were murdered in the most horrible, vile way by these terrible, awful people.
So how did this then impact? Because you were about to leave, weren't you? So what on earth did you do then?
Well, first of all, you have to do something like I do. You have to get permission from the authorities. You can't just wander across the country. You'd be stopped. There are security issues. I was near the Algerian border, which is a closed border. I was going across military zones. There are all sorts of reasons. So I needed permission. And you can't, you're kind of visible with 6 camels. And the last thing the authorities want, both during that time and also during the time of Corona, was a strange foreign woman wandering around their country, because they were worried about keeping me safe and about anything happening. So we had to redo all our permissions, and really that was my expedition organizer, Jean-Pierre Datchary from Dardaiv, from Désert et Montagne Maroc, who is a god amongst men. I mean, he sits in the tiniest local bureaus for hours with wadges of paper. He understands the system. He's been in Morocco for 40 years. He's actually a Moroccan citizen now, even though he's French by origin. So he did that for me. And then what I had to do was think about my own, did I want to do it first? Was I worried? And then make amendments to how I might do it. So the practical amendments I made were I didn't share a map of my route beforehand or during. I was going to have a live tracker. I'd arranged to have so people could follow me live. And I decided not to do that. It seemed like too tempting. And then I had one night, to be honest, where I thought, I'm such a lovely target, and I know I am. Should I do this or not? And then, by that time I'd lived in Morocco for 6 years, and I'd lived with Moroccans, and I thought, honestly, after 7/7, I still got on the tube and the bus in London. It's the same thing, really. Terrorist attacks happen everywhere in the whole world. Unfortunately, that is the curse of our age. Look at that horrible shooting in the school in America last week. I mean, awful. These things do happen. Absolutely. You know Morocco, you know Moroccans, you know how wonderful they are, and that most of them would take a bullet for you, frankly, honestly. So just go and don't worry about it. And on the whole, I stuck to that. I had one night, but you'll have to read the book about that, because something happened. I was like, oh, in my tent.
I know. I read that. My heart was in my throat, but I knew you'd survive because you'd written the book.
I know.
But yes, but it was quite dramatic, wasn't it? It was like, whoa, okay.
But it's one of those things that's like you frighten yourself to death, and it's nothing. It's like being a kid, the bogeyman under the bed.
Mm. Yeah, but that's understandable when you're in the middle of the desert, isn't it? I think
yes.
That's understandable. I'll let you off for that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
So has traveling and doing what you do changed as you got a bit older?
Absolutely, definitely. And I don't know if you have the same experience in China, but it's so much easier when you're older. It's so much better. I don't know how I should caveat this. We live in an age where some of the things I now say may be terribly offensive. If so, I'm sorry, but you asked the question and I'm going to answer it as truthfully as I can. Once in Morocco, once you're kind of past the age of fertility, once you're past that age, men stop being interested in you sexually. And it's fantastic, because when you're younger, you just get hassled all the time. And so do Moroccan women. They get hassled too. In fact, it's now illegal to hassle women on the streets in Morocco. They've just passed the law.
Wow.
But it still goes on. So that kind of, if you like, when I was younger, because I've been traveling the Middle East and Africa all my life. So, when I was 19 years old with waist-length hair and beautiful, pale Scottish skin going to Syria, I remember men crossing the road to grab me by my tits, literally. I'm not exaggerating. I remember going on a bus journey and this man behind me stuck his finger up through the seats and was like putting his finger in my bottom. And I was 19 and I was too embarrassed to say anything. Whereas, of course, now he'd have got such an earful. But that was the reality. And now, none of that. Now I'm like auntie, lala, khalti. And it's fantastic. I can be friends with men. I can be friends with women. I'm not a threat to anybody in any way. There's no kind of, possibility, there is, but it's so much less. There's no kind of sexual tension all the time. People treat you here with such beautiful respect. And, it's wonderful. It's such a blessing. And it's nothing about being invisible or being forgotten, or on the contrary, I'm like people love me here. I'm treated like a film star. It's just that it's age and gender appropriate. And now I'm the age of the mama. I'm the age of the auntie. For some people, I'm the age of the grandma, let's be honest. And so I'm treated in that way. And it's absolutely liberating and fantastic.
That was another thing I wanted to ask about, was what your experience has been seeing how older people, and especially women, are viewed in the cultures in which you have experience of. Because, obviously for you, it's been very different. But I have this, I've done a lot of research about different cultures and the way that different cultures view older women especially. And I'm thinking that, where you are, it's a very different way of interacting with older women than, for example, here, where women do complain that they lose value and become invisible the older they get.
Yeah, I'm not going to get into the debate about losing value and becoming invisible, because I've never felt that. I don't feel it in the UK at all. I think things, I think we do need to start discussing that as women in our midlife. Honestly, mm-hmm. If what you mean is 25-year-old blokes in the bar don't look you up and down anymore, no, they don't. Are you looking them up and down? Because if you are, get a different perspective. That's weird. Mm-hmm. We're in a different stage of life. We're not invisible. Mm-hmm. We're not unheard. We're there. That's really a mindset that I'm keen, and I know you already are, Rachel. I really support you in this. We need to change that. It's not true. It's a kind of myth. Probably designed to make us buy more face cream. It's nonsense.
Exactly.
Yeah, it is. It's bollocks. however, let's talk about here. So I'm 59 now, so I'm still what I would consider in midlife. And because I look a lot younger, sorry, that sounds awful, but I do look different to Moroccan women my age. It's not, I don't look younger, I just look different. And I'm doing different things. So people still say things to me like, oh, you should get married and have a baby. And I'm like, it would be a miracle. And they're like, why? You're still young, you're still beautiful. I'm like, guys, I'm 59. Those days have passed. And they go, oh, but pray to Allah, it might happen. I'm like, oh, God. But so that always cracks me up as well. I'm like, really, it's not going to happen. However, people of my age, not what you have to remember, but one thing I've observed in Morocco is, and in Muslim countries generally, is that the mother is everything. Even in the Quran, you have to say the name of the mother several times before you say the name of the father. The mother is enshrined as the central person in your life. In life, not just in your life, in life. So as you go through your life's journey, now I'm not a mother, and that's another problem. We can talk about that, because people are like, they've got to have children, and men do as well. And people say to me things like, you have no worth, you're not a mother. But I know it's a disaster. But
my jaw just dropped then.
I know, but I have the perfect response, which is, God has set my feet on a different path.
Ah, I like that.
Put that in your back pockets, everyone. But because the mother is revered here, and people take their ages, nobody wants to stay younger. You're just the age you are. So we don't have that ridiculous embarrassment that we have in the West when people say, how old are you? And you go, I'm 59. They're like, you're just the age you are. And, no amount of plastic surgery and monkey glands are going to make you any younger than you are. You are the age you are. So here, you're in the part of life that you're in. And when you're my age, normally a Moroccan woman would have her children and her grandchildren, and she would be being treated beautifully. She'd come through those awful hard work of rearing all the kids and working really, really hard and keeping the house clean and getting them to school and getting them through school. And now she should be at the stage where the girls are grown up, the boys are grown up, they all come back to mama at the weekend, or they take her with them. And she's getting to relax a bit and enjoy life and enjoy the family and have a bit of downtime. So it's a very different, and it's a very different thing. Age here is not judged in that, oh, you're not young, oh dear. It's when you're young, you're young. When you're in the middle, you're in the middle. When you're old, you're old. And every stage has its rules and its regulations and its place. So I think it's a lot easier, and it's marvelous. When I walk with my shopping up the hill, people come and help me. Thank goodness. It's a really steep hill and it's really heavy.
Yeah, I don't personally understand the people who get so upset when people stand up for them on the tube or want to help them, because I've seen that in Chinese culture, and it's not that you're old, it's that you're older than me, and therefore I owe you a duty of respect, and one way of showing that respect is to offer you a seat.
Yeah, that's so well put.
Offer to help you.
That's so well put. And honestly, again, my top tip for a happy life: if somebody offers you help of any kind, accept it, even if you don't really need it, because they're doing such a lovely thing. And if you accept it and you thank them, you've made their day and they've helped you. And it's like good vibes all round. So I agree with you, Rachel.
My mum at 88, she still doesn't want to accept a seat from somebody on the tube. I'm like, for heaven's sake, Mum, just take the seat.
That's crazy. Feisty.
It is crazy. It is feisty, but it's crazy because there is still, there is this shame about having this old label on her. But I think if we can just frame it in terms of somebody being older, and then there's that respect, then we can accept the help, can't we?
Yeah, and let's be realistic. Age really is a comparison thing, because I'm 59 to my parents in their 80s. I'm just a young thing. And it's like, my dad's got memory problems. So this is the best thing ever. My dad's got memory problems. So he'll say to me every time I see him, he's like, Alice, how old are you now? And I'll go, Dad, I'm 59. He goes, oh, what? I wouldn't bring you older than 32. And I'm like, woohoo, woohoo.
It's funny, isn't it? Oh my goodness me. It's all relative, yes. And I'm always talking about how age is a spectrum. I don't think we go from young to old. You know, we are all older than somebody else and younger than somebody else. So it's an evolution, isn't it?
And
I
do
think.
you devalue somebody because they're older? I don't think so.
No.
Does anybody hate their granny because they're old? Anyone in the world?
Mm.
No.
Yeah, I know.
We all love our grannies.
I know. There's so much wrong with our society. There really is. It's just, I think you're lucky to be where you are in some respects, because it sounds to me like it's a much easier place to grow older.
I mean, I do consider myself very, very lucky to be where I am. And I think, you know, there are positives and negatives in every single culture. And I love our culture. So please don't think I'm slagging off Western culture. I'm not. I love the freedom. I love the fact that individuals are considered. I love the fact that people can practice their sexuality completely freely, for example, that women are put into or not put into get the top jobs. These are all very important. And I could not live. I mean, I don't live as a Moroccan woman. I live as a Western woman in Morocco, surrounded by Moroccans and I hope integrated, but still as an outsider. But one thing is, I've been debating with myself, and I don't know what conclusion I've come to, is I wonder if I've tried to step back to the past, because I find some things in our culture disturbing. You know, I'm moving back to a time where families were important, and in a different, that sounds bad. Of course, families are important to all of us, but you know what I mean? I'm moving back to a culture where it's much more traditional. And I'm trying to work with that. And I find myself comfortable in that.
And also where generations live together, don't they? Where you've got multi-generational households,
Yeah.
Which is something that, you know, we've often lost.
Honestly, I don't get, I mean, like people say to me, they say, Alice, I want to ask you something. I'm like, oh gosh, strap myself in. They go, Alice, is it true that in your country you put your old people into homes? They literally, no, they literally can't believe it. They're like,
yeah.
Why'd you do that? And they go, what, you mean you put your mother into, like, you don't look after her, you put her into a home? So, and I mean, there are, you know, I don't think there's as much, for example, dementia and Alzheimer's here that I've observed people die a bit younger. But it is a question, certainly, that's made me think. Although my mother swears that she would rather, I think, cut all of her own limbs off than come and live with me, which I think is a bit rude.
Your mum's feisty too, then, isn't she?
We should get our mothers on like a play date.
Feisty mothers, yeah. Now, you may be going backwards in terms of sort of your cultural experience, well, not backwards, but back in time. But I know you are a new TikTok star. So how did that happen?
I am a TikTok star. I am the wrong demographic completely to be one. However, yes, well, it's very odd. I do my TikTok in Arabic and Tashlahit. And I started it I was fed up with Instagram because all the numbers are falling all the time. Hardly anyone sees my stuff anymore. They've changed their algorithm. It's a nightmare. I thought, all right, let's just put something on TikTok. Because I make content all the time. It's what I do. And I'm seeing fab stuff all the time. And I thought, you know what? Do it in Arabic or Tashlahit, because you're living in this country. You're traveling in these countries. Everything else is in English. Crack on. So I just started doing it just for a laugh. Then, like, I think my third or my fourth video got 350,000 views.
Oh my goodness.
And something like 10,000 likes. And honestly, I was so surprised. It was hilarious. And I thought, well, just keep doing it. So I've kept doing it. And I've just, earlier in the year, I completed a walk across Jordan, in fact, I crossed the whole country on foot, which was extremely difficult. And all the way down, and I did my TikToks, all the way down, people came up to me and said, TikTok woman, TikTok woman, TikTok
really?
woman. And here in the village, people quote my own TikToks back to me, which I find hilarious. And my most popular TikTok video has got 2.2 million views.
Oh my goodness, you really are a TikTok star, aren't you?
Well,
Gosh.
I mean, I laugh about it, but I laugh about it, but I'm also like secretly insanely proud of it. I don't know why, I don't do anything, but I'm still kind of quite chuffed.
Yeah. Well, you've always worked in the media, haven't you? And I bet you've never had audience figures like that before.
I know. But that's more views than breakfast views. What can I tell you?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's really nice, but on a slightly less self-congratulatory note, what people like is not actually me. It's the fact that I am reflecting their own country back to themselves in their own language, and maybe showing the bits that they might not have seen. So I think that's what the real draw is.
And I think one of the things I've heard you say as well, which I can so appreciate, is that you've always enjoyed being the outsider. You've enjoyed being that person who has the slightly different view and can then communicate that. So I can imagine you would get a lot of pleasure out of, it's all very well communicating to us over here what life in Morocco is like, but to be able to communicate to people in Morocco what your experience of their country is must be really gratifying.
Oh, it is. Yeah, that's really a nice way to put it. For me, it's all the conversation, so it's just a way of extending the conversation. And when someone comes up to me, I did this one TikTok in which I say, the Scots and the Moroccans the Scots and the Amazigh are very, very similar. Scotland and Morocco are the same. We have mountains, we have snow, we have rain, we have wind. I said, but the only difference is that Scotland doesn't have any sun. And people quote that to me all the time. I'm walking down the village, and the thing is that then starts a conversation about, I'm from Morocco, you're from Scotland, what do you think of our country? Is it true that there's no sun in Scotland? And it's a way of starting that conversation. So yeah, I really appreciate it.
Oh, it sounds great fun. So let's just switch gears slightly again. What was the impact that COVID had on your trip and on your life generally? I know it had quite a big impact, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, thank God, alhamdulillah, I didn't have, actually my parents have just had COVID, but they're fine. 4 vaccinations, no symptoms. I think like everybody else, I was worried, frantic about my family being in a different country, and, they're old, and I was really worried about them, especially at the beginning. And I was worried about me living in Morocco. Would people turn against me? Like we heard reports at the beginning, Rachel, you'll be very sensitive to this, about Chinese people being attacked. And, here in Morocco, COVID was brought by foreigners like me. So I was a bit worried about that. I mean, that was nonsensical. None of my worries happened, which actually is another thing to think about. I hated being confined to the house. We had 14 weeks of lockdown where we weren't allowed outside the house, except for with a certificate from the government to go shopping like once a week. And I obeyed it very strongly. In Imlil, I'm the only foreigner who lives here. There are other foreigners in the valley. One actually, Jacqueline, who's French-Swiss, but I'm very visible, and I didn't want anyone to think that I was breaching laws and rules because I thought I could, in that kind of, I can do what I like, I'm a foreigner. So I'm hypersensitive to that. So I really obeyed the rules, more even than my neighbours. And I stayed inside for 14 weeks. And the most I walked was 2 kilometres. It was absolutely horrific. I mean, I have the most stunning view from my terrace, in fairness. And I know you're recording some videos. So if you're video people, we should take them out to the terrace at the very end, which kept me sane. And I have my cat and I have my lovely neighbours. So I isolated in the compound, so I was never lonely, ever. And that was amazing. And I'm safe here. I knew that if anything happened, my neighbours, they would look after me like their own. So that was good. But COVID, I mean, I can't think of anything positive it brought. Maybe it did. It didn't for me, I don't think.
Yeah, very hard, very hard. And I think didn't you get stuck in the UK as well? You couldn't get back to Morocco at one stage.
Yes. So when did so I finished, I managed to squeeze, I'm quite proud of myself actually. I managed to squeeze in the 3rd leg of my expedition, which is in Walking With Nomads, the Atlas Mountains leg, after the first lockdown, and as it transpired, before the second one. And I managed to get it in, and it was fantastic. And I learned about how COVID had affected the nomads and the people in the rural communities. And I walked with my men, and we were like, it was like refinding freedom. Can you imagine, after being locked in the house, suddenly you're walking across the earth again, the planet, and, in my tent with the camels, with my favourite men in the whole world, well, apart from my other favourite men, sorry everyone. I was just, it was fantastic. And that feeling of liberation, and it helped get rid of that weight that weight of imprisonment, of lack of freedom. And it was a fascinating time to be doing it. So I was like gobbling it all up, and we found dinosaur footprints. Say no more. Then afterwards I was like, right, I have to get back to my family. So because the flights were opened, I flew back to Scotland. And then I flew back for Christmas. And then on the 26th of December, they closed Morocco's borders indefinitely to everybody with no notice. I was like, so I was at home for 6 months. I was in the single bed with the ceramic cats upstairs. And yeah, I lived with my parents for 6 months, which was wonderful, and they are wonderful. And we had a lot of fun together, actually. But it was very difficult for me because I didn't know when I could come home, because my home is here now and I couldn't get back. I'm an adventurer. I signed my emails adventurer, and I was in, I was in a single bed in Curry in Edinburgh. So I felt like I was being a bit inauthentic and a fraud, but I realised now that was something to think because I wanted to think negative thoughts. It was nonsense. I really appreciate now I had 6 months with my parents I would never, ever have had. I got an insight into their lives. We reconnected in a way that when you live together, you reconnect. And it was wonderful. So the one thing, if I could talk to myself now, but I think this is very difficult for all humans, I would just say, stop worrying about when you can get back. Really stop thinking about it because it's making you unhappy. And I wrote my book.
So how old were you when you actually stopped the job and started the adventuring?
So 47.
So you were well into midlife when you made that decision, weren't you? Which is brilliant.
Yeah, totally.
I love that.
In a way, I'm just to say to everyone, it really wasn't a decision. It was kind of a series of choices. And I think for people in midlife who are thinking about things, A, it's never ever too late. It really is not too late. And B, perhaps, we're so goal-oriented. I speak for myself, extremely goal-orientated. I spent all of those years climbing up ladders of success and career, and I'd got there, I'd been an editor at the BBC. I was CEO of a company. I'd built it up to £10 million a year turnover. It's all marvellous. And then things happen in life, and then I just ended up cycling across Africa, as you do. And that was the first step. And I didn't know it was the first step onto this new path. I didn't know that. I didn't know I was going to write a book about it. I just wanted to do the thing. So I did the thing. And then I kept following my instincts and my heart and my opportunities. And I'm now here. So, midlife, the good thing is I'd saved money. So I had something behind me. I was totally free, not married, no children. And I'd always craved and striven for that freedom. And I had it. So I was able to move forward in my life in this way. And it's been really eye-opening.
So what advice do you have for women who have a secret wanderlust or dreams of adventuring, but they don't feel able to, or yet? What advice do you have for them?
My advice really is just do it. I mean, honestly, and don't delay. Don't kid yourself. Don't say, I'm going to do it in the next few years. You can plan, but start planning today, now. Start planning now. If you're listening to this and you want to do something, just write it down and start planning it. And you can plan it first in your head, then get logical, and then go on. And you don't have to get everything right. Don't get too detailed. People are different and personalities are different. I'm the kind of person I'm like, sign the deal and then I worry about the details, which can sometimes be problematic. But go for it and don't worry. You are enough. You can do it. The world is waiting, and it's just start. I think start. That's the hardest thing. Go for it. Very practical advice. If you're doing big, long things like me, just make sure you've either got good partners or you really know what you're doing. Don't, have the information. Talk to a lot of people. Be lucky. That's the most important thing. And what I found really useful as well, though, just for me, this may not be for everyone, is that I have saved that money. I have got security, touch wood, in as much as anyone does, for the future, so that I can look towards my 70s and 80s when I may need care, etc. I've got enough to do that. I've always continued to pay my taxes, my national insurance, etc. So I would say to you, if you want to do a big adventure or even a little adventure, go for it. if there are repercussions for the future, at least think them through. Don't worry about them, but plan for them. And then gather your information and go, and don't hesitate. Don't worry about it. Don't hesitate. Don't be unsafe, of course, but, you know, do it because you will enjoy it and it will be great.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow, and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.